You may have been expecting news on the Pac-12 Mountain West Conference mediation front. We are too. We'll tell you what we know, what we think's going to happen. Plus, we've got some changes in the college football playoff format with seeding, and the politicians are rattling their sabers. We'll talk about what it means. I'm Jon Canzano. Thanks for watching this. You can find my work at joncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. You can find him at wilnerhotline.com. Wilner, where should we start with this Memorial Day weekend update episode?
You got any plans?
Well, I'm going to work. I'm going to not stay far away from my laptop.
Okay.
I think there's some fun other sports going on, like Oregon softball's in a super regional. I'm interested in that. And so we got some sunshine here in the Pacific Northwest. So I'll be outside maybe with the kids. How about you?
Take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Got some stuff going on. We got some family coming in town next week. So
Nice.
Getting ready for that. I think that, we were talking before we started about this mediation, Pac-12 Mountain West mediation. And I pretty much guarantee that they will come to a resolution and announce it on Wednesday at 6:30, because that's when my daughter's high school graduation ceremony is.
Nice.
So we can pretty much count on that. Maybe the House lawsuit might get finalized then.
Yeah.
College football, everything at once.
I love it. So at least we know. At least we have the framework of that. Like, okay, so the litigators I talk with, I had them look at this mediation and the various lawsuits that are tied up in it, and they thought, hey, they started mediation on that Monday. Yep. Maybe if they continued to mediate into Tuesday or Wednesday, we might get a resolution. It looks like they are continuing to mediate. At least I'm told they're still engaged, multiple lawsuits. We know that there's a federal judge or a retired federal judge who is the mediator. A little bit of shuttle diplomacy going on as they sort of shuttle between the lawsuit in Denver involving the departing Mountain West schools, and then the Mountain West Conference, and then the Pac-12 and the antitrust suit, and then there's a contract law dispute that is in there as well with the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. But, what else do we know here besides, information hard to come by because everybody is under a gag order?
Yes, it is very hard to come by. No leaks for a week. That's impressive these days.
Yeah.
I think there's two elements to the timing, I think, that lend some context. One is that they don't actually have to get this thing resolved via mediation until July 15th, I believe, is when the stay is lifted on the lawsuit. They got a 60-day extension, and they're early on in that tenure or in that period. The other thing is, remember in the fall of 23, when Washington State and Oregon State took the outgoing 10 to court, I mean, those mediation, I want to say there were 6 or 8 different sessions. Mm-hmm. It spanned maybe 2 months from start to finish. So I think I kind of thought they would get it resolved in the, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday window. They probably haven't, it seems. But it could go for weeks.
Yeah. And a couple of things, like the Pac-12's law firm, the law firm that the Pac-12 hired, I did a little research into them, and, they have represented Google, Intel, the Major League Baseball Players Association. They specialize in these antitrust cases, particularly as they pertain to sports. And so I think the Pac-12's got the right set of lawyers. I can also say that, like, while information has been hard to come by, the general mood that I'm getting from the Pac-12, the new look Pac-12 campuses, and also the Mountain West headquarters, is that everybody's encouraged that these settlement talks are continuing. Nobody seems to be in a bad mood about it. I think both sides are receptive to whatever is being discussed, whatever is happening. I did have one longtime litigator who's at it for 40 years, and he's been in a lot of these deep mediation and settlement discussions. He told me that, you've got to be present. The decision makers have to be present, and often the mediator will require the decision makers to be present in the room because they don't want to have to go through an intermediary to go get a decision made. So I was told that there were a lot of parties involved in that Mountain West lawsuit with the departing schools. I believe all of those campuses, Colorado State, Utah State, Boise State, I think decision makers for those campuses have been involved and have been present in those meetings. Yep. And they feel like everybody feels like there's progress being made, but you don't really know. We're only going to find out where they ended up, Wilner. We're not going to know the give and take. get the play-by-play of like, oh, here was the opening position of the Mountain West, or here was the opening position of the Pac-12. And I find that interesting.
Yep. I would assume that for those three schools was presidents, athletic directors, general counsel, maybe CFOs too. But yeah, I heard the same thing. A lot of people involved. I do not believe San Diego State and Fresno State were there present, since they're not technically part of that lawsuit.
Yeah.
And I also don't believe Washington State and Oregon State were present, but there were a lot of folks, and it's complicated. There's no doubt, right? There's a lot of money at stake. It's you've got two sets of plaintiffs and one defendant that's the same for both suits. And they have no choice, right? These can't go to trial.
No,
they can't. So they all know, they know they have to figure it out.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, San Diego State and Fresno State technically could not sue because you've got, a CSU school in San Jose State still involved in the Mountain West Conference. It's the CSU system would be suing the CSU system. And so while they can't sue, I do think, Wilner, that whatever settlement that those other schools get, I would expect Fresno State and San Diego State to be paying about the same exit fee, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. They are trying to take all these different pieces and put them together in basically one pot and come up with a resolution that suits everything. And that adds multiple layers to it. There's no doubt about that. And at this point, right, I mean, it could be a couple weeks before, they may have figured out the basic framework of a deal, and then the details, everybody goes back to their campuses perhaps, and they figure out a few of the small details. I don't know, but at this point, the only deadline really that matters is July 15th when the stay is lifted.
I also think that, you're right that Washington State and Oregon State, at least the athletic directors, were not there present. They may have been on Zoom calls. They may have dropped in on a Zoom or a video conference call, but Scott Barnes was on campus in Corvallis. Ann McCoy was on campus in Pullman all week. And so, they weren't there, but, the quote I got, you saw it, like, I can't tell you bleep, came from, a source involved who said, basically they're bound by mediation and bound by this gag order that the mediator has issued, and they can be punished by the mediator if they don't adhere to that. So there's some strict guidelines with that within the mediation. Also, look, you've got all these different lawsuits. I think you and I are probably on the same page. 17 million to 38 million in exit fees. I expect that. What's your over under on what Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State end up having to pay the Mountain West to get out?
I've always thought that the Mountain West had a good case in the exit fee lawsuit, and the Pac-12 had a good case in the poaching penalty. So I look at it like, maybe the Pac-12 pays 25 cents on the dollar in the poaching penalty, and maybe the Utah State, Colorado State, Boise State pay 75 cents on the dollar in the exit fee case. And the grand total is somewhere in the middle.
I kind of thought 13.5 million, 15 million for the exit fees.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the same page there. But I think the Pac-12 wants to pay zero on the poaching penalties. And I think, they're going at it two ways. One, they're saying it's an antitrust issue that, hey, this is not enforceable. We should owe nothing. And then the second way they're going after it is there's a contract claim that they're making. And they're basically saying that the entire contract was null and void. And therefore, there should be no poaching penalties. And I think maybe their stronger case is on the contract front, even though I think they have a really strong case on the antitrust issue. I think the real risk for the Mountain West is that they not only lose the poaching penalty lawsuit, but they end up having to pay attorney's fees. And that firm the Pac-12 is using, Wilner, I would not want to be paying their fees. That is not a cheap bill that's going to come.
No, and just to echo what you said at the top, I talked to the general counsel for a conference that is not involved in this, just total neutral party, who said that the firm the Pac-12 has hired is very, very good. And it's the same group that represented the Pac-12, the Pac-2, so to speak, against the Pac-10 in the fall of 2023, Kecker. And they're good. And we saw that in action in where were you? Colfax?
Yeah, Whitman County. Yeah, Whitman County
County.
Superior Court. Judge
Yep.
Gary Libby. Shout out to Judge Libby and his wife Trudy, who dropped me a note after I wrote favorably about their small town. So, um, the other thing too is, the 990 for the Pac-12 in the fiscal year ending 24.
Yep.
I don't know if you did this, but I scrolled right to legal fees, and it was a record-setting amount. I think they had doubled the legal fees that they had in the prior fiscal year.
Big number.
And it was a huge number, probably a record-setting number for a conference. And they're going to probably end up in that ballpark again moving forward. I do think that the expansion timeline and the media rights timeline, I think all of that, even though no one at the conference wants to say it, I do think all of that is mixed up in this in some form or fashion.
Makes the most sense for sure, right? I mean, Occam's razor kind of deal. The simplest explanation is usually true, and that holding things up, and holding things up for the Mountain West as well, because they're trying to get a media rights deal done at the same time. And I think that if I'm ESPN or Fox, I want to know what the deal is with the legal stuff before I sign a multi-year deal worth tens of millions of dollars potentially.
Yeah,
I want to know who's in the conference and are there outstanding legal cases for sure.
Yeah, and there's some onlookers here. I wrote about this week that the Big Sky Conference, which is watched UC Davis and Sacramento State kind of say, hey, we have our own plan, we want to go do our own thing. The Big Sky's sitting back watching what happens here, because if the Pac-12 is successful in prying UNLV away from the Mountain West and Air Force leaves for the American's also watching, I think, this case very closely, and this settlement very closely. There's a chance the Mountain West could pivot, and look a little harder at the Big Sky. So I think the Big Sky's interested, a little uneasy about what's going on. And I think the American, certainly, as I mentioned, is watching, because if UNLV goes to the Pac-12, I expect Air Force in the American.
Yep, no doubt. There's multiple layers to it. And, in realignment, you got to get ready for collateral damage, as we've seen over and over.
Yeah. And I don't think the Pac-12 has to have UNLV. People keep emailing me and they're like, why are you so in love with UNLV? I just think the geography works, and it's just an easy geographical thing. But UNLV is not perfect. There's a case to be made for Texas State or UTSA. There's a case to be made for trying to get Memphis or Tulane to play football only. I think there's some options here, but I think to me, that pool of who could be in this conference is narrowing now down to about 3 or 4 schools, not 8 or 9 like it was before. How about you?
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. I always have thought that Las Vegas is more attractive than UNLV specifically, right? You want to be in Vegas because it fits. It's growing, a lot of events there. But UNLV itself, I'm skeptical about UNLV over the long haul, partly because of all their financial trouble, right?
Yeah. And who's driving the ship there? I mean, who's in charge? Is it a president? Is it the regents? Is it, who's in charge at UNLV? That's a whole nother question. Hey, before we go, some news on the CFP front, seeding change coming. This is the Oregon rule, so to speak. Ohio State wouldn't have been the 8th seed under the new format, but what do you make of this? That the CFP is going to seed the teams 1 through 12. Your conference champions will get a financial benefit, at least in the first year. They'll get $8 million instead of $4 million. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that it's a good solution for just 1 year. This only applies to the upcoming season. They are not allocating the top 4 seeds to conference champions, to the highest ranked conference champs. It now is just to the highest ranked teams based on the selection committee's final rankings after the championship game. And I think in some ways it's a compromise. The ACC, the Big 12, the Group of 5, not necessarily the best thing for them, although I don't think that's totally clear either, because there really is a sweet spot. If you can be a conference champion and you're seeded 5, 6, 7, 8, then you get the extra money. You get a home game, and you don't have that long layoff. And the value to a school of having that home game is gigantic. So
get a game you can win, right? And
Yeah,
instead of sitting and having a bye as a conference champion, if you're Boise State or Arizona State, and then you're sitting and
right.
waiting for Penn State or Texas, you're now playing an opening round game against maybe an opponent you can beat.
Possibly, and maybe you get it at home. So,
Yeah.
Boise State Athletic Director Jeremiah Dickey, who's been a guest here and presumably was at the mediation earlier this week, he tweeted something yesterday after the news that was, he clearly wasn't happy. He called it the Boise State rule, and I totally get where they're coming from
Yeah.
but there is a scenario where you can, it can work out for you if you
Yeah.
are in the Big 12 ACC Group of Five.
And I think if you're Boise State's AD, you play that role. You put the chip on your shoulder and you
Absolutely.
say, hey, it's us against the world," and you lean right into that. Finally, a little bit of saber rattling. Presidential Commission. They hit the pause button here, Wilner. What are they doing?
They did hit the pause button, and I think part of it, if not all of it, is based on Ted Cruz trying to get some legislation through. They've been trying for years to get bipartisan legislation on some codifying some NCAA rules, maybe antitrust protection. We'll see. I think part of it also might have been that Cody Campbell, the Texas Tech billionaire booster, emerged as a leader, unofficial chair potentially of the commission, and he clearly doesn't want the SEC and the Big Ten riding off with all the cash and all the access. And I think the SEC and Big Ten said, "Whoa, here,
Yeah, wait a minute. Wait a
we're
minute.
not handing over this commission to some guy who's representing the Big 12."
Yeah.
So everything is on pause, and we'll see when they reconvene. It just was so perfectly college sports, right? When Nick Saban, who is reportedly going to help lead the commission, comes out multiple times this week and says, "I don't know that we need a commission," right? I mean, that is exactly college sports in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting when you see the Big 12, the ACC, and the group of 5 schools. At some point, they're going to figure out they're better off huddled together like penguins, and they're a stronger force. And Brett Yormark even going along with hey, we'll go along with the reseeding,
Yep.
because it's what's good for it's the greater good, and we hope the
Right.
greater good is what everybody's thinking about ultimately. Like, we need someone saying that.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, basically said the same thing yesterday as well.
Yeah.
Both of them were out there. They are trying to get the high ground. They're
Yeah.
trying to put the Big Ten and the SEC in position where if they ram through these AQ bids for the playoff over the long haul, that they're going to look bad.
Yeah.
And hey, we're making a compromise here for the betterment of the game. You guys need to do the same thing for the longer term contract, and we'll see if the SEC and Big Ten do that. I'm
Yeah.
hardly convinced that they will compromise on that.
Well, I would love for people, our viewers on YouTube, to tell us in the comment section what they think is going to happen with the Pac-12 and Mountain West mediation. I want everyone to have a great long weekend, and we'll be back next week with an all-new episode. You can read me at JohnCanzano.com. You can read him at WilnerHotline.com. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a happy holiday.